Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome back to the D1 Audible cheat sheets. I've split chapter 13 from the textbook into two episodes, A and B. And if you've ever wondered why this chapter 13, exists at all in D1, here's the answer. This is the invisible hand chapter. You can't taste a decision like avoid ullage, but you can taste what it protects. You can't see molecular SO2, but you can feel whether a wine is clean, stable, and still itself 6 months after bottling. Chapter 13 is where winemaking becomes less romantic and more real. Logistics, chemistry, microbial risk, and style all moving together minute by minute. Let's start with oxygen, because oxygen is the great amplifier. In wine, oxygen isn't simply good or bad. Its timing and dose. Oxygen itself isn't wildly reactive with many wine compounds, but it kicks off oxidation reactions that create products which then react further. So, oxygen becomes a chain reaction starter. That's why one careless moment at the wrong stage can cost you brightness, aroma, and color, and one controlled exposure at the right time can build stability and complexity. For fresh fruity wines, oxygen is usually the enemy. Think of the fragile aromatic compounds that make wines feel alive, especially thiols in something like Sauvignon Blanc. Those can break down in the presence of oxygen. And you don't just lose a little fruit, you lose the point of the style. White wines also show oxidation visually. Pale becomes gold, gold becomes brown. Reds have more natural protection because phenolics can buffer oxygen uptake. So the same oxygen exposure that would bruise a white can be less obvious in a red until it isn't. When a winemaker wants to protect a wine from oxygen, that's often described as reductive or protective winemaking. It's not a vibe, it's a set of actions. One of the simplest is avoiding ullage, that headspace of air between wine and the top of the container. If a vessel isn't perfectly airtight and wood isn't, you lose liquid through evaporation, and that creates more headspace. So, topping up becomes part of quality, not glamorous but foundational. Then there's the use of inert gases nitrogen, carbon dioxide, argon to flush oxygen from pipes, presses, tanks, and even to blanket the headspace when the vessel isn't full. The point is not that these gases add something, the point is that they don't react and they keep oxygen away. The winemaker can also choose impermeable containers. Stainless steel and thick concrete don't let oxygen seep in the way wood does. Even closures matter. A screw cap can minimize oxygen ingress during bottle storage compared to many other options. And temperature is a quiet lever that students often underestimate. Cool, constant temperatures slow oxidation reactions. This is why part of cellars are cool, why grapes are ideally picked cool, and why warm fruit arriving at the winery can be such a style risk. Now, here's the twist: oxygen isn't just trouble, it's also necessary. Yeast need oxygen at the start of fermentation to build a healthy population. And if you deny wine oxygen forever, you can tip into reductive off flavors. So again, it's timing. There are also places where oxygen is explicitly used as a tool. In some whites, exposing must to oxygen before fermentation can increase oxidation stability later. That's the logic behind hyperoxidation, where you intentionally oxidize easily easily oxidizable phenolics early, so the finished wine is less prone to browning later. In reds, oxygen is part of the chemistry that helps anthocyanins and tannins link up, improving color stability over time. And then there's the long view. Oxygen exposure over time changes aroma and flavor. Fresh fruit can move toward dry fruit. You can develop honey, caramel, coffee, leather, mushroom, the language of maturity. And in some styles, high oxidation isn't tolerated, it's required. Think Oloroso sherry, Madeira, tawny port. Even outside those extremes, controlled oxygen can be one of the engines of complexity. So, how do winemakers increase oxygen exposure when they want it? Cap management in red fermentations that splashes wine, small barrels where oxygen ingress relative to volume is meaningful, more rackings, more lees stirring, leaving ullage, techniques like microoxygenation. But with oxygen comes microbial risk. Oxygen can favor spoilage organisms such as acetic acid bacteria and Brettanomyces if conditions allow. So, oxygen is never free, it has a monitoring cost. That brings us neatly to sulfur dioxide, SO2, the other gas in this pairing. SO2 is almost universally used because it does two hard jobs at once. It helps protect against oxidation and it helps control microbes. SO2 is a preservative with two headline properties. First, it's antioxidant, not because it instantly eats oxygen, but because it reacts with the products of oxidation reactions and stops them from continuing the chain reaction. It also inhibits oxidative enzymes. Second, it's antimicrobial, inhibiting many yeasts and bacteria, though tolerance varies by species. SO2 can be applied as a gas, liquid, or solid, including forms like potassium metabisulfite or potassium bisulfite. A small amount of SO2 is produced naturally during fermentation, typically 10 milligrams per liter or less, but that's not the same as purposeful protection. Legal limits matter. SO2 is toxic at high concentrations, so regulations cap it. In the EU, a benchmark maximum is 150 milligram per liter for red wines and 200 milligram per liter for white wines, with higher allowance for sweet wines. Organic rules are stricter than conventional. In the USA, organic wine excludes SO2 additions and requires naturally occurring SO2 to be under 10 milligram per liter. But there is also a separate category, quotes, wine made from organic grapes, that does allow SO2 additions. Natural wine producers may add none or only a small amount, often at bottling. And if a wine has more than 10 milligram per liter of SO2, the label has to declare sulfites. Because even at these low levels, some people can have allergic reactions. Now, here's where distinction level understanding comes in. When you add SO2, not all of it is doing useful work. Some reacts with compounds in must or wine and becomes bound SO2, ineffective for antimicrobial and antioxidant protection. The portion that remains is free SO2, and even within free SO2, most exists in a relatively inactive form. The small fraction that exists as molecular SO2 is the most effective. What controls that fraction? pH. Lower pH means a greater proportion of free SO2 in the molecular form, so SO2 works better. Higher pH means you need more SO2 to achieve the same protective effect. This is exactly why pH is not just a number on a lab report, it's a control dial for stability and microbial safety. Timing also matters. Many quality focused winemakers prefer fewer, more meaningful additions at key moments. When grapes are crushed, at the end of malolactic conversion, and at bottling, rather than constant small additions because the impact is often more reliable. But SO2 isn't a free lunch either. High levels can dull aromas and make wines taste harsh. So the best producers don't solve everything with SO2. They reduce the need for it by using hygiene, effective sorting, cooler handling, and oxygen management. And now we move from the chemistry to the real world chain. How grapes get from the vineyard to the winery without collapsing into oxidation, microbial spoilage, or physical damage. Once harvested, grapes are vulnerable, especially when it's warm. Warmer temperatures increase oxidation rates and accelerate microbial activity. Black grapes are somewhat less vulnerable to oxidation because of their phenolic content, but they're not immune. So, what do producers do? They harvest and transport grapes in the cool, at night, at sunrise, early morning, because cool fruit is a quality advantage. They may add SO2 at harvesting or at reception for antioxidant and antimicrobial protection. They can chill fruit on arrival. They sanitize bins and equipment to reduce microbial load. And they think carefully about the physical format of the fruit. Whole bunches in small crates behave differently from loose berries with juice sloshing in large bins. Hand harvested grapes often go into small crates. That can be for quality. Minimal crushing means less juice exposure, less oxidation, less microbial risk, or simply because the scale is small. In many places, growers are working tiny plots and moving fruit on tractors. Small crates are practical and protective. But sometimes those small crates are tipped into large hoppers for transport. That increases crushing and juice release. So producers may add SO2 at that point to control risk. Machine harvested fruit arrives already destemmed, often with some juice released. This is efficient, but it raises oxidation and microbial risk unless the chain is managed tightly. Some modern harvesters even sort fruit, crush whites, and add SO2 in the machine itself. Again, the theme is control. At grape reception, volume and intent decide the system. Large volumes move via conveyor belts or screw conveyors. A belt is generally gentler for quality potential. Smaller volumes can be handled manually. If fruit arrives warm, the winemaker may choose chilling before processing to preserve aroma and reduce spoilage risk. Whole bunch chilling can happen in a refrigeration unit, but it takes time and can bottleneck the line. Though that cold room can double as temporary storage when presses and sorting tables are jammed. If fruit is already in a fluid state, machine picked, destemmed, crushed, a heat exchanger can chill quickly. These systems cost money and energy, which is why harvesting cool is still the elegant solution when possible. Then we hit sorting or triage, and this is where quality becomes economics. Sorting is labor, time, and usually lost yield. The more meticulous the sorting, the higher the cost, and often the less wine you can sell. But in poor years or in cool climates where underripe or moldy fruit is more likely, sorting can be the difference between a clean wine and a compromised one. In great years, sorting needs may drop, though mog, material other than grapes, like leaves, twigs, insects, still show up. Quality sorting can happen in the vineyard through skilled pickers removing bad bunches. It can happen on tables or moving vibrating bells that also remove mog. It can happen pre and or post destemming. And at the higher end, there's optical sorting, where a machine scans a reference sample and rejects individual berries and malt that don't match. It's expensive, selective, and usually reserved for premium and super premium wines because the economics only work when the bottle price can carry it. And that's where we'll pause this episode, right at the winery door, with fruit cooled, sorted, and protected, ready for the mechanical choices that will shape the must. In the next episode, we go into the machinery and the decisions that students always see on exam papers: destemming versus whole bunch, crushing versus pressing, press type and pressure choices, must adjustments, fermentation temperatures, yeast choice, vessels, malolactic conversion, and the final tweaks before maturation and bottling. I do hope this helps with your prep, and I'll see you in the next episode.